All right. So if you can't already tell, I'm in bed again. Nothing. I'm making a video. I'm making a YouTube video. All right. So this is gonna be the story about my ex-girlfriend. Now I talked about my ex-girlfriend in the video called "Insane Car Rape Story." She was the one that sort of came to the rescue, and she actually warned me about it. She was like, "You don't need to." She's like, "You don't need to mess around and stuff." She was like, "Those girls are crazy and stuff," and I was like, "Whatever. You don't know what you're talking about." Anyway, I want to get into it about what the story is on her because she plays a pretty significant role in all this. Um, she has her own struggles in life, but I think for me, the relationship I had with her was also pretty traumatic from I guess from like a cultural standpoint, and in the end, she just became really like almost vicious, like just really manipulative and willing to put me in all types of crazy situations. So I want to talk about her. I'm going to talk about how we met. I'm going to talk about our relationship, and then I'm going to talk about when things started to go south. Okay, so I met my ex. I'm not going to say her name. I met my ex while I was at the Citadel. I was seeing other people at the time, but she was one of the people I was seeing. So I remember the first time we started talking, and we met. I liked her because she was playing hard to get. I remember that. And it was clear that she did like me, but she was kind of standoffish. And I kind of liked that at first, so I pursued her a little bit more. And long story short, we ended up going on a couple dates, and things were fine. She was impressed with me, and I thought she seemed nice. She was kind of shy at first, but I just felt like she had like her guard up. It was no problem. All I had to do was um, make it so that like she was comfortable and it was fine. I remember the first time we ended up having sex. This is I don't want to put too much detail out there, but like for her sake, but this is a significant part of the story. The first time we had sex, she said, "The next person I have sex with, I'm gonna date." And at the time, I was seeing other people. I had a lot of different uh, girls I was talking to at the time, and so long story short, we did end up having sex, and I kind of brushed that comment off. I was like, "All right, no, that's." I just thought to myself, I said, "Whatever, that's you're just being extra or whatever." But she was serious, and she ended up trapping me. So if she's out there, she's probably going to view this video. I don't think she would deny anything I'm saying, but I'm sure she would. I don't know what she would say. Anyway, I'm just going to keep going. Um, so basically, we continued to hang out. We got a lot closer. She happened to have an apartment at the time, and I didn't because I was still at school. And when I was out of school, I just went back home and was staying with my parents. So it was really convenient for me because she said, you can come over anytime. And it was pretty much just me and her in the apartment. I got to know her pretty well. I mean, I at the time I got to know all the not like girlfriends, but like girls I was talking to. I got to know all of them, we were friends, all of the girls I was talking to. So with her, it was no different. But I tended to hang out with her more than anyone else, just based on my situation, because she was the one that lived closest to me, and she always wanted to hang out, and I always wanted to hang out, so it was just cool. So she was going through some stuff. I was going through some stuff. We were both in kind of a shitty situation, but we kind of helped each other out. And I remember one day she came to me, she told me, she said, you should you should date me. And I said, all right. I said, no, I don't really want to. And she said, she basically like persuaded me into it and said, her words were, just give me the title and you can date whoever else you want. And so I said, well, that kind of sounds like a good deal. And at the time it was, because she had a place. I had just got kicked out of school. I was staying with my parents. I could go over to her place whenever I wanted. She would bring me gifts and stuff. Like she would bring me like fruit or anything that I wanted to eat and stuff. So I said, well, that's not a bad deal. So so we became like in a relationship on Facebook, and I felt like I was like kind of doing her a favor, but it wasn't like a serious thing, because she said, well, you can still talk to whoever else you want. About a month or two later, she was like, well, you're not cheating on me, are you? And by that point, things were really good between us. She was kind of taking me around, showing me different things, making sure that I was in a really good place emotionally. And for the most part, I was having a really good time. I met a lot of her friends. They treated me well for the most part. Um, we would go out to eat at certain restaurants. She taught me how to like eat healthy, and we would like go to get different foods, and I mean different clothes. Sorry. It was kind of it was definitely a better relationship that I had, involving my dating history. Like usually it was either just sex, or it just wasn't. I don't know. She was a little bit more interesting. She had more hobbies. So she was able to show me a different side of life. And I really appreciated that. So 2 months into the relationship, when she said, are you cheating on me? I said, no. And I actually ended up cutting off, for the most part, all the other girls that had been talking to previously. Even some of the ones that they would tell me, like, what are you doing? Why are you in a relationship? And even like some other girls that I was talking to, they would say, you should date me instead or whatever. And I was like, well, I made a commitment to this girl, and that's what I'm going to do. Um, so that same summer, I applied to college, and I took a tour of the school. I think it was the first school I got into. Um, I wanted to go to USC, but that was the first one I got into. So I took a tour of it, and I got in. So I went to the school. Things were fine for the most part. And I think right before, in the middle of like first semester, that was when I broke up with my ex. That was when me and her broke up. And that is important because she, I told her, I said, I just came out of a military school. Now I'm on a regular college campus. it's like 70% female and 30% male. And, I don't want to hurt you, so I'm going to break up with you. Before that, there were a multitude of other instances. Like, I remember we were hanging out with some of her friends, her family friends, and they would ask me, they would say, "Do you love her?" And I would say, "No." And that was important, I had to be honest because, obviously, if I don't love her, I don't want to lead her on. But regardless, she ended up, once we broke up, once I broke it to her, we were sitting in the car, it was face to face, and I said, "I'm breaking up with you." She broke down and couldn't handle it and was like, "You broke me." And I think she just like was really attached. Um, Not like necessarily to me, but like I think she had like attachment issues, like abandonment issues or something. I'm not sure. Like I'm not a psychologist, but there would be other situations where I would stay over at her place and I would lay in bed with her until 2 a.m. in the morning. And at the time, I didn't have a place, so I was staying with my parents. My parents would say, "Where are you?" And I would say, "I'm coming home." But she wouldn't let me leave. As soon as I would get out of bed, she would say, "What are you doing? Where are you going?" And it would be like a shock to her, like she couldn't be left alone. And she had issues with like panic attacks and stuff, and she ended up like having a stroke or something. She was only like a year or two older than me. She's in her 20s. This was when she was about like 23, 24. So she definitely had some panic issues or some type of issues. I don't know. She was on medication and stuff, and her family issues were interesting too. But she told me not to tell anybody, so very few people know about her specific issues. But it was definitely a concern for me because whenever I would leave, she couldn't handle it. And so after we broke up, that's when everything else went down in regards to like in the other YouTube video when I talked about like the insane cry rape story. There are some other stories that happened that I'll get into later. Um, but a long story short, she she ended up putting me through hell after I broke up with her. And I want to talk about what she did because it was one of the grimiest things I'd ever experienced from someone who I thought genuinely cared about me. Like, I didn't think that someone was capable of something like this. So it was really traumatic for me, especially as a guy, and what she was willing to put me through, just based on like society's perceptions. Um, so where do I start? She, I was at school. This was after the incident happened with the, was it after? I don't remember, but I was at school when this happened. All these incidents were pretty close together. Like the car rape story, this one, and then there were a couple other ones that I want to talk about. They were all within the series of like a month or two. So she shows up on campus. She's drunk, and she just says like, "I wish you would just hit me." And I was like, "What?" And she was like, "Yeah, I wish you would just hit me." And I was like, "That doesn't make any sense." And she kept on like trying to like get me to hit her. So long story short, I said, you have to leave and stuff. And she refused. So I said, all right, I'm going to call campus police. And she was like, no, 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 don't call campus police, this and that. And long story short, I said, I'm leaving the apartment. Without even touching her, we ended up leaving the apartment together. So we were out of the apartment, and at this point, we're in the parking lot. We're by her car. Once we're by her car, she's grabbing me, like putting her hands on me, and then this story is so insane. All right, so she's grabbing me, she's putting her hands on me, and I'm saying, I'm gonna call the police, the campus police, and she is grabbing for my phone, and in the midst of her grabbing for my phone, I'm like reaching back, and her car is parked right there, and I'm trying to convince her to leave, and she's like, "You almost hit my car." Now, I remember this detail because she compared me a lot to her ex-boyfriend, who was also black, happened to be the only other black boyfriend she had. She's had multiple other boyfriends, but this was the only other black boyfriend. And this ex-boyfriend of hers happened to put a dent into her car. And she told me it's like the only dent in her car. She said, "Yeah, that's from my ex-boyfriend." And after me and her broke up, she always compared me to him, no matter what. She'd be like, "You're just like him." And she would, so what she would do is we would still hang out after we broke up because my parents would be going through their own stuff and my brother was in college and the rest of my friends were busy. And she was always willing to come over. She would still stay the same. So I said, all right, well, she's an avenue that I can trust. And if need be, then I can count on her to sort of be there for me if I get myself into a bad situation. The problem with this is that she completely took advantage of this, as you can see by this example. And whenever she wanted to, she would twist the roles and pretty much just become manipulative and try to put me in compromising situations. So I lost my train of thought. The real like deal breaker happened when I was at her place and I had a friend at the time and he was, I guess, like hitting on her behind my back. So, and she was always saying to me, like, are you going to do anything about this? And I was like, yeah, I'll talk to him about it. But he was persistent. He didn't care. And he was just kind of blatantly disrespectful about it. So what she did is she basically coordinated with him and one of my other old friends. So much for friends. And she put me in a situation where basically like she tried to see what she could do to get me to get jealous. So one night I take her phone and like, all right, my whole relationship with her, she's grabbing my phone. Like she's saying like, I can't trust you because you talk to these other girls and stuff. So I'll be laying in bed on my phone like this and she'll snatch the phone out of my hand. And I'm like, you can't just do that. But she would do this the whole relationship. So this is the one time I say, I'm going to do the same thing she did. So I grab the phone and she just attacks me. Like she just jumps on my back starts hitting me in the head. I'm on FaceTime with my brother. And I have her get off me. She grabs my laptop, which was in a case at the time. She's swinging it around everywhere. She's threatening to break the laptop. She's threatening to hit me with it. And I'm like, what the hell? So, long story short, I got long arms. So I grab her and I'm like, give me my laptop back. She gives me the laptop back. And there's this whole struggle that happens. Like from start to finish, I think it was like I went to the bathroom. She busted through the door, pushed me in the shower. I got out, got her off me, pushed her against the wall, went off to the other side of the room so I could grab my stuff. That's when she jumped on my back. And after all that, she had this like cut on her lip, and she grabbed her lip and she was like, "Oh my god!" And she was like, "Look at all this blood everywhere and stuff." And I was like, "This girl, this girl is if if you've ever seen the movie Fight Club, where the guy punches himself in the face, that's what she did." So she calls the police after she literally attacks me, and she says, "I've got a 6'2" African American male here, and he's beating me, and he might have weapons." The reason why this is shocking to me is because, again, our whole relationship, she's super caring. Now, there are some red flags that I should have been aware of. Number one, she did not know who Martin Luther King was. She did not know about the civil rights movement. I remember one day I had come over to her place, and there was a show on Netflix called The 60s, and she was watching it. And she said, "I never knew black people were this articulate." And she would just make little comments like that here and there throughout the relationship. And I'd be like, what? So I took it upon myself, and now granted, this girl is mixed. This girl is literally half black, half white. She was raised by a white family. And nothing against that. I don't really know. Like, she's from Michigan. I don't know where this girl's from, but I know one thing is for sure, is that this girl meant trouble. She didn't mean trouble at first, but at the end of the day, she meant trouble. So that whole thing happened, and basically, for about the next, I'd say, 6 months, I was going through it with her, which is crazy. Like, if you think about it, because the insane car rape story that I posted, that happened before everything was said and done between me and her. And my ex put me through some crazy shit. When I say crazy shit, like unheard of, like stuff that stuff that happens in movies was was how the relationship between me and her went. I mean, she she would make these rules. She would say like, if you come over to my apartment, you have to take off all your clothes and get and get under the covers with me. Like, she would make it so that it was almost impossible to leave. And then it was almost like I was constantly being sucked back into the relationship because something would always happen, and she would say, "Well, it's okay, you can come stay with me." After the honeymoon phase was over, you know, things would get manipulative all over again with her. So it was one of those things where like I had no choice but to cut off the relationship. After the situation happened where she called the police after she attacked me, the police came and then they told me, they said, just don't come back here again. I did not come back to that specific apartment again, but me and her did see each other after that point. The problem happened. The problem was is that she was constantly contacting me while I was away, and she was saying, "I have your stuff. Come and get it," or "Can I meet you at the school?" And I would always say no. So I blocked her number. There were a couple numbers she called me from, so I blocked all those numbers. And she started calling me off her friends' numbers. So I would get these phone calls from numbers that I didn't know, and it would always be, she would always just say like, "Oh, this is so and so, and I'm calling from like a friend's number, or I'm calling from somebody else's number." It could even just be somebody's number just off the street. She, I guess, like had I don't know what she was doing, but maybe she just had my number in her contacts or whatever. But she would call me off of anybody's phone, even after I'd blocked her, and she would say things like, I had a bong at the time that I had bought, and that was a big point that she wanted to make because her whole thing was she was like, she told the police, she said, he has weapons, which number one, I don't. He knows gang members, which I did not. There was only one guy that maybe I knew who was into that stuff, and he really wasn't even into it. And it was just like she was trying to make this whole big case that I was like super dangerous when I wasn't. So this was around the time that the documentary, like the 13th Amendment, came out, and me and her watched it together. Uh, she also introduced me to like the O.J. Simpson case and all that stuff. I didn't even know who that was until that Netflix documentary came out and me and her watched it. But she made a point about that. I That's another red flag. She knew who Martin Luther King was, but she didn't know who Martin Luther King was, but she knew who this guy O.J. Simpson was. And she was like a big fan of the Kardashians, and me and her really disagreed on that. I was like, these women destroy black men, and she didn't want to hear that. She was like, no. Like she would like break down and cry when I would say things like that, and I would be like, what is your problem? So we really didn't agree on a lot of things culturally. And what I found is that when I introduced her to certain things, like that documentary, The 13th Amendment, whenever things wouldn't go her way, she would use that against me. I mean, she's contacting the police, making me seem like I'm bigger than I am, saying I have weapons, and pretty much trying to use the police to take me out. And I have to convince I'm in a situation where I have to convince the police that, everything she's saying is a lie based on what actually happened. So it was one of those situations where it was my word against hers, but ultimately what she did was she basically used the system's weaknesses against me. And that really took a toll on me. That she was capable of that. Um she's supposed to be somebody I can trust. And I don't talk to her now. I mean, even like the last time I spoke to her, which was in November, I want to say, she was still doing the same things. She was still being manipulative and, whatever. And I just told her, I said, it's just not healthy for me to talk to you anymore. But I did care about her. Um, it's traumatic for me because all the experiences that I've had, I've dated all types of girls. And when she did those things, she pretty much was like, I'm willing, like, her mentality was like, yes, I'm willing to have you killed. Like, I'm willing to put you into a situation where you either get shot, killed, or go to jail. And I was like, who does these things? Like, who gets into a relationship with somebody, does all these things, like buys them gifts, has sex with the person like 24/7, and then puts their significant other through that, just because, like, I said, like, I would break up with you, or like, what's the reason? If there's a reason at all. Like, that really affected me. And that's why, that's a big part of the reason why I sort of steer clear of relationships now. I know that she was kind of I mean, she's definitely not unique, but, and when I say that, I mean, like, there are tons of other cases of women that do that, but, like, I know it's not as common for a situation like that to happen. It's just that for me, I would rather avoid drama, number one, and number two, I can't really afford to get into a relationship with someone else and have pretty much like two people to take care of. And I've listened to podcasts and I've listened to other people, and they say, well, you really don't know what you're missing out on. You could meet someone that's really special, and they could be the one thing that's missing in your life. Your life could do a complete 180 if you meet the right person. But ever since that happened and some other instances occurred, I've really viewed women as like landmines and only been able to see, like, I was already a little shy, but after all that stuff happened, I was like, like, what, how am I supposed to just go out and just be like, oh yeah, uh, you want to date or whatever. Plus, like, that's not even how things are supposed to go. It's just so that was just like really traumatic for me. Um, so I got the insane car rape story. I got the story of my ex girlfriend. There's some other interesting stories that I got too. And again, these stories, race plays a factor in all of them. It plays a factor in all these stories. And I don't understand why that is. Like, before 2016, none of this was happening. None of these issues regarding race occurred. After that, though, it's like everything just went out the window. Like, even if I'm not dating girls, like when I went to California, looking at the California neighborhoods, almost meeting Nipsey Hussle, he got killed. The Charlotte riots, just all these things. Like, I look out and I'm just like, what the hell? And I'm sorry because I know this video is about my ex girlfriend, but this is the reason why. This is a big part of the reason why I don't date. You know, I don't have casual sex. At least, I try as hard as I can not to. I haven't had casual sex in a long time. It's been like probably a year or maybe even more, which is not like me. Anybody that knows me knows that I don't go maybe like a month without having sex, and that's typically a long time for me. But lately, I've been staying clean. It has been crazy. Um, Anyway, so that's the story of my ex-girlfriend. I wanted to dedicate this one entire video to her because I just think that it's just a really crazy story. I mean, how would you feel if you're in a relationship with somebody that, number one, you care about, number two, she's buying you gifts. I mean, you feel like she's got your back no matter what. It's one of the best relationships you have. And then she just goes around and just betrays you in the worst way possible. Like, imagine like your worst nightmare. And she's like, yeah, I'm gonna become your worst nightmare. Why? Because because you broke up with me. How insane is that? Like, what? And it's not even because I broke up with her. That's the other thing I can't get over. Like, there was a significant portion of it that was race related, and the fact that I wouldn't do what she wanted me to do. So that's a big part of the reason why I'm cautious around women today. Anyway, that's it for this video. Let me know what you guys think. Hit the like button, comment. You don't have to subscribe. Not yet. I haven't included any edits in these videos, but I want to know what you guys think about this. Please let me know. Okay.